The failure of the Droid Trooper project ended up being the last time Tageco would pitch an Imperial battle droid project, but their Imperial military collaborator, Rom Mok, wouldn't be so easily dissuaded. Over the course of the Dark Times, he became a general at the Imperial Department of Military Research, and he kept working on the next version of the Imperial battle droid, a combat droid that Mok believed would render organic soldiers obsolete. This initiative, which languished in obscurity for years before making several breakthroughs and receiving additional funding around the time of the Battle of Yavin, was called the Dark Trooper Project. The first round of Dark Troopers, classified as Phase 0 Dark Troopers by General Mok, were actually cyborgs, aging clone veterans who had been selected for enhancement. Mok's cyberneticists removed over 70% of these clones' organic tissue, replacing them with cybernetic enhancements. These half-droid super soldiers were the Dark Troopers you might remember from the classic Battlefront games, and they were undeniably effective, but they weren't without issues. Most of the clones that became Phase 0 Dark Troopers were unwilling participants, and the trauma of the enhancement process left them with serious psychological issues, ending in suicide or psychosis. The Empire retired the line as a result, ending the Dark Trooper project for a time. But Rom kept up his work, and by the time of the Galactic Civil War, he had developed the Phase 1 Dark Trooper, the first true battle droid the project had produced. These units were mostly a proof of concept, as shown by their skeletal design, but they were incredibly intelligent and packed full of unique abilities. They were equipped with built-in jump packs, blast shields, and vibroblades, and they were primarily made from frick, the same hardy, lightsaber-resistant alloy used in the electrostaffs of General Grievous's Magna Guards. Phase 1s were limited in utility as they only carried melee weapons, but they only saw use as sentries in tests for Imperial higher-ups, and they were always pitched as a prototype, not a finished product. At any rate, the Phase 1 Dark Trooper was impressive enough that they won the Dark Trooper project the personal endorsement of Emperor Palpatine, who gave General Mok a massive boost in funding and command of the Arc Hammer, a massive spaceborne factory that would be dedicated entirely to the Dark Trooper project. There, Mok and his team improved upon the Dark Trooper design, coming up with the most well-known Dark Trooper model, the Phase 2 Dark Troopers. The Phase 2 Dark Troopers were among the most fearsome battle droids ever designed. Instead of a frick exoskeleton, these droids featured heavy frick armor, which evoked the design of Stormtrooper armor. This similarity was purely aesthetic, however. Dark Troopers were far more powerful than any Stormtrooper could ever hope to be. These droids were both durable and incredibly strong, and impressively, they were simultaneously very agile, with their built-in jetpacks allowing them to outmaneuver as well as overpower their opponents. Unlike the Phase 1 Dark Troopers, Phase 2s carried powerful handheld ranged weapons that could spray off up to 400 plasma blasts and 20 dumbfire missiles without reloading, which was enough firepower to annihilate entire rebel companies. As that description suggests, these droids were absolute tanks on the battlefield, powerful enough that not even Imperial bureaucrats could ignore their effectiveness. Phase 2 Dark Troopers were deployed from the Arc Hammer via hyperspace pods delivered directly to key targets across the galaxy. The droids were first deployed shortly after the Battle of Yavin, conducting an absolute massacre of rebel forces on Talay that won the Dark Trooper project the personal approval of Darth Vader. Urged on by Vader, Mok improved upon the Dark Trooper design even further, resulting in the deadliest Imperial battle droid of all, the Phase 3 Dark Trooper. Only one of these droids is known to have existed, and fortunately for the Rebel Alliance, it never left the Arc Hammer. The Phase 3 Dark Trooper was even larger than its Phase 2 cousins, and while it was an autonomous battle droid, it could also be reconfigured to act as an exosuit for organic personnel. Indeed, battle droid might have been an inadequate classification for these monsters. It'd be more accurate to call them droid tanks. With even more heavy armor than Phase 2 Dark Troopers, Phase 3 Dark Troopers were nearly indestructible, and they were also incredibly well armed, boasting built-in jetpacks, wrist-mounted dual blaster cannons, 6 shoulder-mounted Plex rocket tubes, and a pair of Seeker missile launchers alongside their handheld assault cannons. Fortunately for the galaxy, the Dark Trooper project was ended after Mon Mothma made the call to unleash famed rebel agent Kyle Katarn. Katarn had been part of Operation Skyhawk, in which the rebels had captured the plans for the first Death Star, and his effectiveness in that mission led to Mothma assigning him the task of investigating the destruction of the rebel base on Talay. Armed with his wits, a personal energy shield, and plenty of guns, Katarn followed leads he picked up on Talay across the galaxy, killing scores of Imperial personnel and battling Dark Troopers, Kell Dragons, and Boba Fett along the way. His quest eventually led him to the Arc Hammer, and after defeating Rom Mok and his prototype Type 3 Dark Trooper, Katarn destroyed the ship and the Dark Trooper project with it. Still livid from the loss of the Death Star, the Emperor refused to commission another Arc Hammer, and the Dark Trooper project ended there. All told, the Imperial era was an interesting chapter in the history of battle droid development. Rather than playing to the intrinsic strengths of droids, as the CIS had done, the Empire's battle droid projects all aimed to make battle droids that could beat organics at their own game. This was something that had previously been prohibitively expensive, but this was less of a problem for the Empire than it had been for other factions, allowing for the creation of battle droids that really did have the potential to render organic soldiers obsolete. However, it was still prohibitively expensive to make an army of them, and in the end, not even the Dark Troopers were a match for the power of the Force, as the actions of unknowing Force adept and future Jedi Knight Kyle Katarn showed. After the Rebel Alliance's decisive victory over the Empire in the Battle of Endor, the Alliance became the New Republic, and 3 years later, it captured Coruscant, becoming the new dominant galactic power. The Empire fractured into remnant factions, which continued the Galactic Civil War until the signing of the Palaeon-Gavrisum Treaty of 19 BBY, which saw the New Republic make peace with the sole surviving Imperial remnant, which controlled a mere 8 sectors in the new territory. This, obviously, was a major galactic paradigm shift, and you might expect it to have had an impact on the evolution of battle droids, but it really didn't. In fact, anti-droid sentiments persisted well past the fall of the Empire. The generation that grew up under Imperial rule and formed the foundation of the New Republic knew of battle droids only from dim, frightening childhood memories or the war stories their parents told. The New Republic didn't promote droid hatred nearly as much as the Empire had, and it even recognized a certain utility droid and protocol droid as heroes of the galaxy, leading to a softening of attitudes toward droids in general. But battle droids were the exception to this rule, and the New Republic upheld many Imperial-era regulations on the battle droid industry. The New Republic itself used battle droids less than any major galactic power before it, only sparingly using Balmoran SD series droids when the situation called for it. Thus, it was the Imperial remnants that kept pushing battle droid technology. Just one Imperial remnant, actually. This remnant was the Dark Empire, the faction led by the reborn Emperor Palpatine from his stronghold at Biss. The Dark Empire was short-lived, lasting only a year after its official emergence in 10 ABY, but in its time, it unleashed several new and terrifying droid technologies upon the galaxy. Most famously, these included the TIE/D droid fighter, a new automated TIE fighter that was basically just a worse Vulture droid, and the World Devastators, massive automated spaceborne factories that devoured planets' natural resources to produce endless waves of ships and fighters. Fortunately for the galaxy, the Dark Empire's swift defeat resulted in these new horrors quickly being relegated to the scrap heap, ending the legacy of Imperial war droids for good. Battle droids didn't see a genuine resurgence until 25 ABY when the Yuuzhan Vong invaded the galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong, you see, had a bit of a history with droids. In its ancient days, the galaxy was dominated by 2 droid races that battled for dominance. One of these was the Silentium, a race of elegant droids that valued order and symmetry, built with gleaming geometrical bodies that ranged from humanoid-sized to 50 kilometers in diameter. The other was the Abominor, a race of monstrous, self-constructing machines that embraced asymmetry, chaos, and conflict. The Abominor were driven by a hunger for power, resources, and also slaves who were made to constantly shovel fuel into the Great Machine's boilers for the rest of their lives. Abominor were constantly modifying themselves, grafting parts from other droids onto their bodies, and constantly expanding their chassis, with some Abominor becoming planet-sized, system-devouring abominations. The Silentium and the Abominor waged a war for control of their galaxy in the distant past, laying waste to many less advanced organic civilizations in the process. Eventually, this inspired the Yuuzhan Vong, at first one of the many slave species of the Abominor, to lead a rebellion with the goal of freeing organics from servitude to the machines. Using biological technology that the Silentium and Abominor were unable to assimilate, the Vong defeated both races and drove them from the galaxy, paving the way for their own devastating wars of conquest, which ultimately destroyed their galaxy and forced them to flee across the intergalactic void, ultimately coming upon the Star Wars galaxy. As a result of this history, the Vong were absolutely fanatical in their hatred of droids, especially humanoid droids, and others that were built in the image of living things. They eschewed all non-organic technology, and when they invaded the Star Wars galaxy, they were disgusted to see how prevalent droids were. Thus, the invaders went out of their way to lay waste to mech worlds and droid manufacturing plants, and they made a habit of destroying droids en masse in immolation pits after capturing planets. The Yuuzhan Vong especially despised battle droids, humanoid ones especially, flying into a rage whenever they faced them in combat. Ironically, the Vong's hatred of droids was ultimately what brought battle droids back into vogue in the New Republic. As the New Republic started to suffer from manpower shortages in its battles with the Vong, it started to deploy battle droids to reinforce its troops. Among the most effective of these droids were the Orange Panthax, a platoon of old B2 super battle droids that trounced an army of Yuuzhan Vong fire breathers on Mantessa. The effectiveness of these droids gave some of the New Republic's more inventive allies an idea. 2 years into the war, the newly formed manufacturing company Tendrando Arms, founded by a little-known entrepreneur named Lando Calrissian, premiered the YVH-1, Yuuzhan Vong Hunter, a line of battle droids built specifically to fight the Vong. These hardy battle droids were armored with Iamanium plates, which protected the droids from corrosive acids, rendering them invulnerable to many Yuuzhan Vong weapons, and they were built for a healthy mix of durability, strength, and speed. Jets built into their legs allowed the droids to make long jumps to outmaneuver opponents. The YVH also featured built-in weaponry, a variable output dual blaster cannon capable of felling a starfighter in the left arm, and an open socket that could be equipped with heavy lasers, sonic blasters, and missile launchers in the right. Advanced sensors allowed YVH droids to be able to easily pick Yuuzhan Vong spies out of a crowd, even ones equipped with otherwise impenetrable disguises. All told, the YVH-1 was extremely effective in combat, more than a match for the average Yuuzhan Vong warrior. But where they really stood out was the psychological effect they were meant to evoke in the Vong. Everything about the droids was meant to make the extragalactic invaders cope and seethe. The YVH-1 was specifically designed to look like a caricature of a Yuuzhan Vong warrior, which alone was more than enough to launch the average Vong into a fit of religious fury, during which they could easily be killed by the agile and cool-headed YVH-1. But the cherry on top was the droid's signature battle cry, spoken in an imitation of Lando Calrissian's voice. "We are machines. We are greater than the Yuuzhan Vong." The YVH-1 was the start of a new chapter in the history of the battle droids. By the end of the Yuuzhan Vong War, anti-droid sentiments had mostly become a thing of the past, and once again, Class 4 droids saw use across the galaxy.